Welcome to today's Business Transformation 101 podcast. I am your host, Bill Fegis, and in today's podcast, we will be discussing SMED, or Quick Changeover. The acronym SMED stands for Single Minute Exchange of Die. In many businesses, machine changeover times can have a significant unfavorable impact on productivity. It is not unusual to find machines that can take up to a full 8-hour shift to change from producing one product to producing the next product. Long changeover times lead to several of the wastes listed in volume 16 of this series, A Primer on Lean. Specifically, these long lead times contribute to excess inventory, waiting, overproduction, and defects. The SMED process is designed to reduce changeover time. The focus is to move internal setup, which is setup that occurs while the machine is stopped, to external setup, which is setup that can occur while the machine is running, and also to eliminate transportation, motion, waiting, and defects. Changeover time is defined as the time it takes to go from the last good part produced prior to changeover to the first good part after the changeover is completed. In a business with a classic batch manufacturing mindset, the solution to long changeover times is to run a minimum batch size to amortize the cost of the changeover time to an acceptable number of units. For example, if the changeover time to run part A is 8 hours, the minimum runtime for part A could be set at 80 hours, so the changeover time is amortized to add only 10% to part A due to changeover time. If the process produces 10 parts per hour, a minimum batch size for part A would be 10 parts per hour produced for 80 hours, or 800 parts. Unfortunately, customer demand is typically not aligned with the batch size required to be economically amortize the changeover time. If the customer demand is 80 units per week, the 800 parts represents 10 weeks worth of demand. This means it will take the customer 10 weeks to consume the part A inventory, assuming the customer demand stays constant. The math shows the company average inventory of part A for that 10 weeks is 400 units, or 5 weeks of inventory. This represents two forms of waste. One, overproduction, that is producing inventory before the customer needs it, and two, excess inventory, that is carrying an average of 5 weeks of inventory. Another waste created by this batch approach is waiting. While the machine is tied up making part A for 80 hours, other products that require the use of this machine are waiting, even if there is current customer demand for those other products. Also, during the 8-hour period the machine is being set up, there is no production being done by the machine. Defects are another waste associated with poor changeover processes. Typically, defects occur when the machine is being adjusted to produce good parts following the physical changeover of the machine. During this adjustment period, defects and scrap are typically produced. The solution to the problems outlined is to minimize batch sizes, ideally to a batch of one, since this minimizes or eliminates overproduction, inventory, and waiting. If the changeover time could be reduced to 10 minutes or less, that is a single minute, the machine could be changed over every day or even multiple times per day. With a changeover time of 10 minutes, part A could run for one shift, which would include 10 minutes for changeover plus 8 hours of production. During this shift, it would produce 80 units, which satisfies the customer's demand for a week. The machine could be set up to run part A 1 day per week and be available to produce other parts on the other 4 days or 32 hours of each week. With a 10-minute changeover time, a different part could run every day, and the changeover time amortization impact would only be 2%, which is the 10-minute changeover time divided by the 8 hours or 480 minutes of runtime. This approach eliminates the average 5 weeks of inventory, the overproduction, and the need to wait 80 hours to produce a different part, plus the amortization impact of the changeover time is dropped from 10% to 2%. The bottom line is that rather than extending runtime or quantity of production of a part to amortize a long changeover time, the solution is to reduce the changeover time, which reduces cost, inventory, and lead time while increasing flexibility and responsiveness. So, how can changeover times be drastically reduced? Fortunately, significant reductions can be made by utilizing the SMED tool, which integrates standard work, 5S, 80/20, and visual management into a coherent changeover reduction process. The first step in the process is to videotape an entire changeover process. In the example described above, that would entail making an 8-hour videotape of the changeover process required to set up the machine to make Part A. This videotape documents the current state and provides the SMED Kaizen team an effective tool to use in analyzing the changeover. The team is trained on the SMED process for a half a day and then reviews the videotape. The team should include the individuals who executed the changeover shown in the videotape, since they will be able to provide the team with specific details of what is shown on the tape. The team is looking to identify wastes that are happening during the changeover. The tape allows the team to review actions in the level of detail necessary. This would not be possible by having the team observe a changeover and attempt to document wastes in real time. As noted in Volume 16 of this series, there are 7 forms of waste that can occur in a process, and they can be easily remembered by the acronym TIMWOOD, T-I-M-W-O-O-D. Specifically, that's T for transportation, the movement of items, goods, materials, or people between processes. I for inventory, items, goods, or materials held by the business as part of its processes. M for motion, the movement of people done as part of the process. W for waiting, people or processes waiting for materials, items, or information to proceed with their work. O for overproduction, producing more items, goods, or materials than required by the next process step or the customer at the time. The second O for overprocessing, including process steps that do not add value from the customer's viewpoint. And finally, D for defects, imperfect items, goods, scrap, materials that must be reworked or scrapped. Many of these wastes, and in some cases all of these wastes, will be present in the changeover process and can be identified by the team in their review of the videotape. The waste list they produce should detail the type of waste and the time impact of the waste. For example, if the operator needs to walk to maintenance to get a wrench required to do the changeover, that waste should be listed as T or transportation, and the time to walk over and back to get the wrench should be recorded. In addition, the team should be noting which activities are currently done internal and which activities are currently external, and noting the time for each activity. Internal changeover activities are actions that are being done when the machine is stopped. External changeover activities are actions that are being done when the machine is running. That is, they occur outside the machine. Once the team has reviewed the entire videotape and documented the wastes in the process and their associated times, and also documented what actions are internal and external, they can rank the wastes and internal-external activities by time. That is, they can do a Pareto analysis of the times. The team follows the following steps using the videotape and Pareto analysis to develop the improvement actions. First, convert as much of the internal setup to external setup as possible. Second, eliminate or reduce the internal setup time using the waste observations, or shift the internal to external setup. Eliminate or reduce the external setup time using the waste observations. Eliminate or reduce any adjustment processes utilizing jigs, gauges, quick change tooling, and fixturing. Eliminate any remaining identified wastes that were not addressed in the prior steps. Next step would be to standardize and document the improved changeover process utilizing the standard work process. Next, use 5S to straighten the process and organize the area. And finally, develop appropriate visual management boards. Upon completion of these steps, the team should have the operators execute a changeover utilizing the new documented process and videotape the process. Depending upon the results of the new changeover process, the team can do another iteration of improvement or stabilize the new process and revisit another cycle of improvement at a later date. The SMED process can provide transformational improvements. Changeover time reductions averaging 94% have been documented across a diverse set of companies. In summary, SMED is a powerful tool that can be used to significantly reduce changeover times. Reduced changeover times result in lower inventory, less overproduction, less waiting, and fewer defects. These improvements provide the business with more flexibility and responsiveness to the changing demands of the customer base. A SMED Kaizen starts with videotaping of the changeover process to give the team a good view of the current state. The current state videotape is reviewed by the team to identify waste in the changeover process and to identify which portions of the setup are internal, where actions that can be taken only when the machine is stopped, and which are external, which are actions that can be taken when the machine is running. The team develops and executes improvement plans to shift internal actions to external actions wherever possible, and then reduce or eliminate the identified wastes, internal setup time and external setup time. The resulting improved changeover process is standardized, documented, and executed to confirm the level of improvement. Future SMED events can be held at the appropriate time to further reduce the changeover time. For more information on the SMED process, read A Revolution in Manufacturing, the SMED System by Shigeo Shingo, or visit the Lean Production website at www.leanproduction.com/SMED.html. In the interest of continuous improvement, I invite feedback from our listeners. Please share your thoughts and ideas on these weekly podcasts, and feel free to suggest topics which you believe would provide useful information for you and our listeners. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and please join us next week when we will discuss the potential pitfalls in developing strategic plans.